Report. Here's something we promised you, to a continuing reflection on the 10th anniversary of the 2010 Constitution. Tonight, we focus on the system of government, a contentious question that in many ways delayed the Constitution review for decades. In the end, after days and weeks of haggling in naivasha, the country settled on what was described as a pure presidential system, heavily borrowed from the United States of America. But 10 years later, was the presidential system a hit or a miss? Tonight on Katiba at 10, Francis Gashuri examines the presidential model and why there is now a clamor to modify it.
That was the moment that Kenyans breathed a collective sigh of relief as the then president lifted the symbol of success of many years of struggle. Contained in that document was a chapter that had kept the country on toes for decades: the executive, or what was simply called the system of governance, departing from the old order.
Excellencies,
the then new constitution introduced a presidential system of government with President Mwai Kibaki at the helm of implementation for less than 3 years before he handed over the reins of power to President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013. As it were, President Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto have been the first full-time wearers of the presidential system shoe. Rerieda lawmaker Otiende Amolo, who was a member of the committee of experts tasked with crafting a new constitution, says a presidential system was not the preferred model then.
We in the committee of experts had proposed a parliamentary system. And it's because the majority of Kenyans at that time, a slight majority, preferred a parliamentary system rather than a presidential system. It was also a view then, a view I hold to date, that a parliamentary system would serve a country like Kenya better than a presidential system. But when the draft went to the members of parliament, the parties, the parliamentary parties, resolved that we retain a presidential system.
Now that you sat in Naivasha and there was this clamor for a parliamentary system, a presidential system, in hindsight, is a presidential system a good thing?
The overtones that you hear about how do you deal with the executive and so forth, we don't know what the final BBI report will be. But you start feeling that Kenyans may want some measure of a hybrid system.
This is a rushed decision. You can't tell me you use only 2 elections to really feel what a presidential system, how it should work and why it should be changed. And in particularly, when you know you have only tested this system using 1 president, yeah, and 1 deputy president.
You know, let us not look at our selfish interest. Some of the people think that if they become president, with the model that we have now, he will have absolute authority. What is the point of having an absolute authority when your country can ban?
William, maybe you can say it in Swahili. Sema na Kiswahili.
You're better than me normally in Kiswahili.
In their first term between 2013 and 2017, President Kenyatta and his deputy Ruto seemed to work like a well-oiled machine, from identical shirts and ties to a public display of affection, then termed bromance. But in the second term, the political marriage has hit a rocky path.
In 2013, the 2 gentlemen had the choice to sign a coalition agreement, but they didn't. They chose to run a unified government. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing will be left for people to interpret based on what has happened. But therein lies a lesson for anybody who, going to the next election, will wish to form a pair. If your boss chooses to ignore you, say as has happened right now, there's nothing you can do about it. And it's not just to the office of deputy president. The same goes to the office of a deputy governor, for example.
Karibu ibadilishe nchi ikuwe katika hali ya ufalme, ya kwamba rais ndio anakuwa rais, baada ya yeye kuangatuka, wakati yake kusha, naibu wake ndio anafuata, anachukua. Kwa sababu hakuna kiongozi mwingine karibu yao. Sasa hatuwezi kubali hiyo kama wananchi. Hii sio ufalme kama Saudia ama sijui Kuwait. Hii ni nchi ambayo ni constitutional democracy. So lazima tukuwe na viongozi wengi ambaye wanaweza ongoza nchi. Sasa hii tuko na rais, naibu wake na makarani wake. Mawaziri hao ni makarani ya rais. Hata hawezi kutambuka ati anaweza atakuwa rais, atachapwa viboko ambaye hajawahi kuona. So ile mtu anaangalia tu hapo juu ni naibu wa mfalme ambaye ni naibu wa rais. Ndio anaona mfalme akingatuka ni mimi ndio naingia hapo. Hatuwezi kubali hiyo.
You saw public spat by the president. Of course, the deputy president supporters made the Tanga issue look like it's a joke, but it was an insult, literally. It was a message being sent to the deputy president that, I don't like you and all those kind of things. And the fullness of time, and then you had a choreographed fight against corruption that only targeted anybody who hung around the deputy president, and then governors being threatened that if we see you in meetings and visiting the deputy president's office, we will be charged, by EACC and so forth. So what the president has done to the office of the deputy president is to make it totally unattractive, in the future for anybody to serve for 2 terms as a deputy president.
In the first term of President Uhuru and Deputy President William Ruto, yes, there was that sense of unity. But that unity was only in perhaps half the country. The rest of the country and the rest of us felt completely excluded. In fact, so excluded that in all the appointments that were made for those 5 years, you would find that 90% of them represented only 2 regions or 2 tribes. And so that is the sense of exclusion that you don't want. In the second term, that apparent disunity has come as a result both of the handshake and perceptions in terms of succession. And so while it may have brought disunity in part of those regions that had unity, I think it has brought bigger unity in the rest of the country.
The 2010 Constitution raised the qualifications for a winning presidential candidate. To ascend to the country's top job, one must garner more than half of the total votes cast and at least 25% of the votes in more than half of the 47 counties. The presidential candidate and the running mate are elected as a pair, and if they win, are joined at the hip.
Wapi nduru ya Uhuru Kenyatta, rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya?
Unlike the past, where former presidents Jomo Kenyatta, Daniel Arap Moi and Mwai Kibaki could do away with their deputies at will, President Kenyatta, under the 2010 constitutional order, cannot sack his deputy. Should a vacancy in the office of the president occur due to death, resignation or impeachment of the holder, the deputy shall take over for the remainder of the term if they had served at least half of it. Now, there is a clamor to amend the Constitution through the Building Bridges Initiative BBI to, among other things, expand the executive.
Because of the kind of tension that a presidential election tends to arouse in the country, we need to tinker with it. Have something that is, with some hybrid. President, Prime Minister, with all manner of other offices. I think it would reduce the tensions that we see in the country during election time. We were very excited about the presidential system because I think many of the people that came to talk to us were telling us about the virtues of the American presidential system. But I think we should leave it to Americans to sort it out for themselves. I think we are in Africa. We need to do something that also appreciates the peculiar circumstances of Africa.
A country that cannot improve its system of governance cannot improve the life of its people. That's the bottom line. So if President Uhuru is going to be the last one in this kind of arrangement, so be it. I'm sure the next arrangement will be better than the kind of governance we have now in terms of, constitutional governance.
In fact, expanding the executive is actually constitutionalizing tribalism in Kenya, because this clamor is between only the top 5 tribes: the Kikuyus, the Kalenjins, the Luyas, the Luos, and Kambas. The top big five tribes in terms of numbers and size. What happens to the rest of almost 37 or 38 communities?
And given the political alignments in this country, if you expand the executive at the top, at any one time, and whether you like it or not, it's always a question of balancing regions and tribes. Anytime you have 3, 4, 5 seats to balance out, it brings a sense of stability in those regions. And that is why I think that it is time to think the pure presidential system that we sought to implement and tamper it into a hybrid presidential system. If not, then we take the courage to go for a parliamentary system.
It would appear to me that, in fact, introducing a prime ministerial office without clarity is conflictual. And the holders of those offices really hold sinecure office. I want to be persuaded why we think that a prime minister will solve our problems. Personally, I don't think so. I think our problem lies in our political culture, not the presidential system or the parliamentary system. Those systems, there are countries which are presidential and they are doing a good job. There are countries which have a mix of them and they are doing a good job. We must make a clear choice as a country that we are going to make the best of the system that we have. Our problem, partly, is the ethnicization of our politics. Let me just be candid about it.
Other than tinkering with the presidential model of governance, the BBI team, in its first draft report, unveiled at Bomas of Kenya last year, had proposed that at least half of the cabinet members be sourced from Parliament. The Prime Minister would be in charge of the government business in Parliament.
Not a major amendment. It's just tinkering with Article 152. Which talks about ministers not being members of parliament. I mean, it's a very simple amendment. In fact, it can be done by parliament. It does not even require a referendum because we are not also altering the structure.
It will be a big mistake to bring members of parliament to cabinet. And I'm saying this. It will reintroduce the inequality we had, where instead of equal treatment of all constituencies, you will have constituencies that are better treatment by having a cabinet minister, somebody sitting in the cabinet. Then you have the independence of parliament and separation of powers doctrine is going to be affected because that is the heart of the constitution.
Assuming Kenyans make the final decision of amending the constitution, let us not have any ambiguity in the amendment. Let us have clarity. Where does the buck stop? Creating in the minds of Kenyans that there are multiple centers of power is not healthy for this country.
With just under 2 years to the 2022 general election, time is of essence.
Any time, any day that eats into these remaining 2 years, we become dangerously close to a disaster. And that's why I keep emphasizing that process of BBI, if it's to be implemented, should be received immediately, and the process should be start immediately and fast-tracked within 4 to 6 months maximum, so that we have enough time to implement it before the election.
If you genuinely implement the Constitution from a clean heart, you will find ways and means of even doing far much better with the existing constitution, than amending it.
I have been concerned about the fact that nobody seems to be addressing the issue of IEBC, unless we also don't take things seriously, and we spend money, colossal sums of money, in the Krieger Commission, whose report I believe everybody in government must have read, who can to read. And there was that particular advice that it is not desirable to change the composition of the electoral management body of any country less than 2 years to a general election.
The system of government has, is and always shall be at the heart of any discourse relating to constitutional amendments, whether Kenyans will return to the ballot in 2022 under the presidential system or not, remains the ultimate question. Francis Gashuri, Citizen TV, Nairobi.